This is Friday, February the 5th. This is going to deal with President Wilson. Now, it is easiest to understand Wilson if we divide Wilson into three phases. Phase one is from 1812 to 1814. And this is when Wilson is going to be the most progressive he will ever be. The second phase is going to begin in 1914 and end in 1918. This is the phase when the United States is trying to stay out of World War I, will get sucked into World War I, and will be the victorious nation in World War I. Phase 3 begins in 1918 and ends in 1920. Now in 1918, the Republicans will take control of both the House and the Senate. And when Wilson brings the peace treaty to the Senate will say no. Wilson will campaign all across the United States to try to get the American people to tell their senators to accept the peace treaty. Wilson will have a stroke, and that pretty much is the end of the Wilson administration. Well, what do we know about Woodrow Wilson? Well, we know that Woodrow Wilson is one of the most educated men who's ever been president. Woodrow Wilson has a PhD in English. Wilson is going to teach college. Wilson will become president of Princeton, a Ivy League school, and then Wilson will eventually become governor of the state of New Jersey. It is during this time period that Wilson will be elected president. One of the tasks that the progressives want is a lower tariff, and it is in the Wilson administration that the Underwood-Simmons tariff will be passed. The Underwood-Simmons tariff is going to lower tariffs on all goods that are coming into the United States. The United States hopes that if we lower the tariff on other countries will lower the tariff on us. The United States will actually say that some items have no tariff at all. This is what is called a free list. Banking had always been a problem in the Gilded Age. Now, large banks were unwilling to make large loans, or what are called bridge loans. A bridge loan is a loan that is a temporary loan. Generally, you owe the money to the other guy for maybe a month or less. Now, the problem is many of the banks will only give bridge loans to their wealthy clients. If you are not a wealthy client, then you are not going to get a bridge loan. And this is going to put a lot of small businesses out of business. There's really too much money in the hands of too few. These few are going to control the banks, and the banks will impose high interest rates on smaller banks when the smaller banks want to get a loan. Well, obviously, the smaller banks are going to have to put a high interest rate on its customers, and its customers won't be able to borrow money because of the high interest rates. Now, some banks could not get money at all, and the customers couldn't borrow money. All businesses have to borrow money to survive. They borrow it, money comes in, they pay the loan off. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is the Federal Reserve System. We have not had a national bank since the end of Jackson's second term. The Federal Reserve System is a national bank. Now, this national bank is going to be the only bank in the United States that is allowed to print up money. Now, this money will be backed by specie. In those days, the money was backed by specie. It is not today. Well, what about all the state banks and individual banks who had printed up money? They cannot print up anymore. And there's going to have to be some type of exchange system. And that's going to become quite confusing. The Federal Reserve System operates out of 12 banks. Now it's hard to see on this map, but the state of Missouri is divided in two. There's a reserve bank in St. Louis and a reserve bank in Kansas City. The 12 national banks will get together and they will decide what the interest rate is, what is generally called the prime. So let's say that I am from Central Trust Bank and I need to borrow $10 million from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank. The St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank will tell me that the prime rate is. Now the prime rate becomes the foundation for all subsequent interest rates. So if I was to loan out some of this money for a long period of time, like in a home loan, then I would give the customer the lowest rate. If I was to say loan out some of this money to a person who wants to buy a car or a boat, this would be a little bit higher rate. If I wanted to use this money for credit cards, this would be the highest rate because the default setting on credit cards is higher than it is on cars, and cars are higher than it is on homes. The Federal Reserve System today is going to regulate the flow of cash, and it does this through the prime. If the Federal Reserve System wants to stimulate activity, they lower the prime. If the Federal Reserve System wants to curtail economic activity, they will raise the rate. So today, with our COVID crisis, the Federal Reserve System has decided to keep interest rates quite low. Now, Janet Yellen, who is the current Secretary of the Treasury, who used to be in charge of the Federal Reserve System, is advising members of Congress that because interest rates are so low, it would be important for Congress to use a lot of stimulus to get the economy going, which means we got to get some cash in the system. The Clayton Antitrust Act is going to be passed in the Wilson administration, where Taft and Roosevelt had wanted to regulate trusts. Wilson wants to outlaw trusts. And the only trusts that are allowed are unions, farm groups, and things that Congress have created. So, for example, the National Football League is a trust that was created by Congress. And that's why occasionally the NFL has to go before Congress. The Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission is going to regulate those people who deal with stocks and bonds. There are certain things you can, certain things you cannot do. And this is outlined by the Federal Trade Commission. Now, for example, my youngest son works for a Fortune 500 company in Kansas City. Now, because he works in the finance department, he is privy to information that the public may not be privy to. He had to sign an agreement with the FTC that said that if he was going to sell his stock in that company, he would have to put in an order and then wait a week for the stock to be sold. This way, he could not do things through insider trading. Wilson's administration is going to have shorter working hours, 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, as opposed to 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. Wilson is going to establish workman's comp. Wilson is going to end child labor. Wilson is going to have a farm authority. This would be a bank that loans out money to farmers. Well, I think this would probably be a pretty good place for us to stop today, because Wilson's foreign policy is going to take a while.